My earliest memories aren't wrapped in the warmth of childhood innocence, but in the cold, sharp edges of disappointment. Specifically, my father Robert's disappointment. It wasn't the loud, angry kind that explodes and is over. It was a constant, subtle pressure, a quiet disapproval that seeped into everything, making me feel fundamentally flawed. Looking back, I realize he didn't just fail as a father in the traditional sense. He actively undermined me, whether intentionally or not, laying the groundwork for a future he seemed determined I wouldn't build on my own terms. This isn't a story about healing and letting go. Not entirely. It's about taking the wreckage he left behind and building an empire on top of it, one he can see. I remember being about 8, showing him a story I'd written, filled with spaceships and faraway planets. I was buzzing with that specific childhood, pride, holding out the notebook like a sacred text. He took it, scanned it quickly, and handed it back without a word, his expression flat. After a moment of silence that stretched into an eternity, he finally said, "You know, writers don't make any money, Sarah. You should focus on something practical." That was it. My burgeoning creativity, dismissed. My dreams, deemed worthless. It wasn't just criticism. It was a directive, a command to shut down a part of myself because it didn't fit into his narrow, fear-driven view of the world. That was the pattern. Anything I showed interest in, anything I was proud of, was met with a dismissive comment, a practical objection, or a comparison to something I wasn't doing, usually something he wished he had done or understood. My report cards, unless perfect, were opportunities for lectures on wasted potential. My attempts at sports were too timid, my opinions too naive. He had a way of making you feel small, inadequate, like you were constantly failing some invisible test only he knew the answers to. And then there was the financial chaos. Dad was a man of grand ideas and zero follow-through. He was always chasing the next big scheme, convinced he was on the verge of a breakthrough that would make us rich. The organic mushroom farm that took over our basement and failed due to unexpected fungal competition. The stock market algorithm he spent months developing on a salvaged computer, borrowing money he couldn't repay, only to have it consistently lose imaginary funds. These weren't just hobbies. They were reckless gambles with our family's security. Money was a constant source of tension. We weren't exactly poor, but we lived with a perpetual sense of scarcity, punctuated by moments of sudden, misplaced extravagance. When one of his schemes briefly seemed promising, my mom, Eleanor, worked herself to the bone trying to keep things afloat, her anxiety palpable, her energy constantly drained by his unpredictability and the inevitable fallout. We learned to live without new clothes when we needed them, without school trips, without the simple stability other kids took for granted. When I wanted to take SAT prep classes in high school, something I saw as a crucial step towards a good college and a different future, he scoffed. Waste of money. If you're smart enough, you don't need classes. If you're not, they won't help. It wasn't about the cost. It was about tearing down my effort, my ambition. This relentless negativity, this chipping away at my confidence and my aspirations, had a profound effect. I internalized it. I became hesitant, afraid to try, terrified of failure, because failure meant confirming his low opinion of me. I struggled with crippling self-doubt. In college, I felt like an imposter, constantly waiting to be discovered as the inadequate person I believed I was. I gravitated towards low-profile jobs, afraid to put myself out there. Socially, I built walls, convinced that if anyone saw the real me, the one he had shown me, they wouldn't like what they saw. My early relationships were a mirror image of the dysfunction I grew up with. I ended up with partners who were either emotionally unavailable, critical, or controlling, recreating the familiar dynamic. It was a painful cycle, born out of a deep-seated belief that this was the kind of treatment I deserved, the only kind of love I was capable of attracting. He also had a way of using technology to exert control. As a teenager, he'd monitor my internet usage, making pointed comments about who I was talking to or what I was researching. It wasn't overt spying in a legal sense, but it felt invasive, like there was no space that was truly mine. He'd accidentally leave printouts of my browser history where I could see them. It was a psychological tactic, a reminder that I was always under scrutiny. Even as I got older and started earning my own money after college, the financial manipulation continued. When I got my first real job as a data analyst, the first thing he did was try to convince me to invest my entire first paycheck in a sketchy real estate deal with one of his equally unreliable friends. "This is your chance, Sarah. Don't waste it on rent. Get in on the ground floor." When I refused, citing a need for savings and stability, he grew angry, accusing me of being timid, ungrateful, and not understanding how the real world worked. The implication was clear. I was destined for mediocrity because I didn't have his supposed vision. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, about him trying to maintain his perceived authority over my life, even from a distance. The weight of the past wasn't just emotional. It was the constant struggle against the limitations he had tried to impose, the fear he had instilled, the narrative of inadequacy he had written for me. It felt like I was living my life under a constant, suffocating shadow. But that shadow didn't just breed pain. It bred a slow-burning resentment, a quiet fury that waited for its moment. I wasn't just surviving. I was observing, learning, and quietly planning. The turning point. The shift wasn't a sudden revelation of wanting to heal. It was a hardening of resolve, a crystallization of the simmering anger into a focused purpose. I was in my mid-20s, building a cautious, quiet life, successful enough on paper, but internally, I was still that scared kid, dismantling her Lego castle. The pressure of living under his shadow was immense, but it was also building a diamond of pure defiance inside me. The specific incident that brought it to a head wasn't dramatic, just another example of his predictable behavior. It was Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house. My brother Tom was there with his then-girlfriend, Emily, who had just gotten into a competitive graduate program out of state. It was a huge achievement, something she was incredibly proud of. Instead of celebrating, Dad spent the entire dinner peppering her with questions designed to highlight the downsides, the cost, the distance, the job market post-graduation. He wasn't interested in her excitement. He was invested in proving it wasn't as great as it seemed. He had this smirk, this look of smug superiority, like he was dispensing harsh truths the rest of us were too naive to see. Watching Emily's face fall, seeing Tom get increasingly frustrated, something inside me snapped. It wasn't just about them. It was every time he had done that to me. Every time he had minimized my achievements, mocked my aspirations, poured cold water on any flicker of joy or pride. I saw him, really saw him, not as a flawed parent, but as a man driven by his own insecurities, determined to keep everyone around him small so he could feel relatively larger. And in that moment, the years of quiet pain solidified into a fierce, cold certainty. I wasn't just going to survive his impact. I was going to actively dismantle it. I wasn't just going to build my own life. I was going to build one that stood in direct, undeniable contrast to his failures and limitations. This wasn't about getting even in a petty sense. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my potential, and shoving his wrongness back in his face, not with words, but with indisputable success. It was about proving him wrong about me, about my potential, about the very things he had dismissed. Later that night, the anger was a cold, focused flame in my gut. I wasn't sad or hurt anymore. I was determined. I looked at my quiet, safe apartment, the life I had built defensively, and decided it wasn't enough. Safety wasn't the goal. Strength was. Success was. Independence. Not just emotional, but undeniable, visible independence was the weapon. The realization wasn't just that I deserved better. It was that I was capable of better, capable of achieving everything he said I couldn't, capable of building the stable, successful life he had failed to create for himself and for us. And I would do it. Not for his approval, but to show him the magnitude of what he had tried to stifle, to make him see it. That quiet determination was the turning point. The subtle shift from passive endurance to active, strategic defiance. The fight wasn't just for my freedom, it was to win a battle I hadn't even realized I was fighting for most of my life. And the taste of potential victory, though years away, was already sweet. Taking back control. The decision to actively build a life designed, in part, as a rebuttal to my father's narrative, was the first step. It wasn't about emotional healing initially. It was about strategic movement, like a chess player planning several moves ahead. Every action I took was filtered through a new lens. Will this make me stronger? More independent? More successful in ways he understands and values, like financially and professionally? I started with therapy, but not just for emotional processing. I specifically sought a therapist who specialized in assertiveness and boundary setting, someone who could give me practical tools to navigate difficult relationships and build confidence. Dr. Chen was direct, challenging, and focused on action. Our sessions weren't just about unpacking the past. They were about developing strategies for the present and future. She helped me identify specific patterns of interaction with my father and develop scripts and techniques to disengage from his negativity and manipulation. I also joined a professional networking group. This wasn't about emotional support. It was about building connections, gaining knowledge, and positioning myself for career advancement. I needed to succeed, not just for my own well-being, but to build the tangible evidence of my capability that he had always denied. I started taking on more challenging projects at work, volunteering for leadership roles, and actively seeking out mentors. The fear was still there, the ingrained terror of making a mistake, but it was now matched, and often overridden, by the burning desire to prove him wrong. Every success, every promotion, every time my work was recognized, felt like a small victory in a larger war. Setting boundaries with my father became less about protecting my feelings, though that was a side benefit, and more about controlling the flow of information and influence. I limited our phone calls, not just in length, but in topic. When he started criticizing my career path or my life choices, I learned to cut him off politely but firmly. Dad, I'm not discussing this with you. My career's going well, and I'm happy with my decisions. If he persisted, I would end the call. It wasn't about changing him. It was about controlling my exposure to him. It was about asserting my autonomy, a power dynamic he had always dominated. The financial aspect was crucial to my strategy. His history of reckless spending and failed ventures had created a deep-seated anxiety in me, but it also gave me a clear target. I would achieve the financial stability and success he never could. I became hyper-focused on my finances. I created a detailed budget, paid down my student loans aggressively, and maximized my retirement contributions. I continued working with Maria, my financial advisor, treating her advice as gospel, building a solid financial foundation brick by sensible brick, in stark contrast to his house of cards. Legal aspects, while not immediately central, were always a consideration, especially given his unpredictable financial behavior. I made sure my own legal and financial documents were in order, wills, powers of attorney, to protect myself from any potential fallout from his future ventures or debts. I educated myself on basic financial law and consumer rights, knowledge that felt like armor against the kind of chaos he seemed to attract. I even quietly checked my credit report regularly, wary of any unknown entanglements his actions might somehow create. Technology became a weapon of both defense and offense. I used apps to track my budget and investments, giving me clear, data-driven evidence of my financial progress, tangible proof of my competence that he couldn't argue with. I used social media, strategically, not to overshare, but to present a curated image of my successful independent life. Pictures of career milestones, travel, paid for with my own carefully saved money, a confident smile. It was a calculated effort to ensure that if he ever looked, he would see not the timid, uncertain person he expected, but someone who was thriving. It was a form of silent communication. Look what I built, despite you. This phase was exhausting. It required constant vigilance, immense discipline, and pushing through deep-seated fears. There were moments of doubt, times when the old insecurities flared up, whispering that he was right, that I was a fraud. But the fire of defiance, the need to prove him wrong, was a powerful motivator. Every boundary held, every financial goal met, every professional achievement gained was a tangible step away from his influence and a step towards my own undeniable power. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about winning the life he said I couldn't have. The journey of disengagement, replacing forgiveness. The idea of forgiveness felt like a foreign concept in the context of what felt like a lifelong battle for validation. Forgiveness, as most people understood it, releasing anger, wishing the other person well, felt like surrendering, like letting him off the hook. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to build my life so successfully that his impact became irrelevant, to become so strong that his criticisms bounced off me like pebbles. So, the journey of forgiveness transformed into a journey of disengagement and redefining the relationship on my terms. Dr. Chen helped me understand that I didn't need to forgive him to move forward. I needed to process the anger and resentment, so they didn't consume me, but that was different from absolving him. It was about severing the emotional tie that still gave his opinions power over me. The goal wasn't peace with him, but peace within myself, a peace that came from strength and independence, not from reconciliation. This journey involved acknowledging the hurt, without letting it fester into bitterness that would only harm me. I used journaling to vent the anger, not to understand him, but to understand the depth of the impact he had. I wrote down every hurtful comment, every dismissed dream, every moment of financial stress, not to dwell, but to acknowledge the reality of what had happened. It was about validating my own experience, something he had never done. Disengagement meant accepting that he was unlikely to change. He was unlikely to apologize, to acknowledge the harm he had caused, or to suddenly become the supportive father I'd always craved. Letting go of that hope was painful, a different kind of grief than mourning a loss of life, but a loss nonetheless, the loss of a wished-for reality. Acceptance wasn't surrender. It was a strategic realization that I couldn't waste energy trying to change the unchangeable. The redefined relationship was one of limited contact, carefully managed interactions, and minimal emotional investment on my part. Family gatherings were navigated with a plan. Arrive late, leave early, stick close to allies like my mom or brother, and have pre-planned responses to his inevitable probing questions or critical remarks. Phone calls became purely transactional, or politely brief. If he started on a familiar rant or criticism, I would use the disengagement techniques Dr. Chen had taught me. A calm statement of boundary. Dad, I'm not going to discuss that. Changing the subject, or simply ending the sus call. Okay, Dad, I have to go now. This wasn't about being cruel. It was about self-preservation and maintaining the integrity of the strong, independent person I was building. Every act of holding a boundary was an act of reinforcing my power in the relationship. It was about shifting the dynamic from him, having control over my emotions and self-worth, to me, controlling my exposure and response to his behavior. True, revenge wasn't about causing him pain. It was about building a life so robust, so successful, and so independent that his past actions and present opinions became irrelevant to my happiness and sense of worth. It was about demonstrating, through undeniable achievement, financial, professional, personal, the extent of the potential he had tried to suppress. It was about living well, despite him, and letting that be the quiet, persistent answer to years of criticism. It was the ultimate act of taking his power away, not by force, but by making it obsolete in my life. This disengagement, this emotional and practical distancing, was my version of finding peace. A peace built on strength and independence, not on resolving the past with the person who had caused the hurt. A new chapter. This new chapter isn't a fairy tale ending. The scars are there, reminders of the battles fought. But they are no longer open wounds. They are marks of resilience, proof of what I've overcome. Stepping into this phase of my life, where I hold the reins completely, is empowering in a way I couldn't have imagined when I was that fearful kid taking apart her Lego castle. The sense of control is palpable. Professionally, I've continued to advance. The fear of failure is no longer paralyzing. It's a signal to prepare and push harder. My career success isn't just a paycheck. It's a tangible symbol of defying the limitations he tried to place on me. The financial security I've built is a fortress against the kind of chaos I grew up in, a direct counterpoint to his lifelong instability. I own my apartment, I have investments, I have savings. It's a quiet source of pride, a constant, silent refutation of his belief that I wasn't practical or smart enough with money. My relationships are built on mutual respect and genuine connection. I no longer tolerate criticism disguised as concern or control masquerading as love. I've learned what healthy dynamics feel like and have cultivated a network of friends and a partner who see and value me for who I am, not for who they want me to be. This is perhaps the most profound form of winning, building connections based on trust and acceptance, something that felt impossible for so long. My relationship with my father exists within the strict boundaries I've established. The contact is minimal, primarily limited to necessary family events, where I interact from a place of polite distance. There's no deep emotional sharing, no seeking of approval, and no tolerance for his old patterns. It's a relationship on my terms, a testament to my hard-won autonomy. He sees my life, my career, my financial stability, my independence. I don't flaunt it maliciously, but I don't hide it either. It simply is, and in its existence, its undeniable success, lies the quiet, irrefutable proof that he was wrong. The strength I possess now isn't just about achieving external markers of success. It's an inner fortitude. It's the confidence to trust myself, the ability to navigate challenges without falling apart, the knowledge that I can rely on myself. I took the energy that was once consumed by hurt and fear and channeled it into building something solid, something real. To anyone who feels like their potential was stifled, their confidence eroded, or their life trajectory negatively altered by a parent's actions, you are not condemned by your past. The anger, the frustration, the sense of injustice, these can be powerful fuel. You don't have to wait for an apology or external validation. You can take back your control, piece by piece, decision by decision. Build your own success, define your own worth, and create the life you were meant to live. Let your thriving be the undeniable answer to anyone who ever tried to tell you that you weren't enough. Your life, lived fully and powerfully on your terms, is the most potent form of reclaiming what was taken. It's not about tearing them down. It's about building yourself up so high they can't help but see.